Welcome to this topic lecture on web frameworks and Express.js. We're going to learn about the basic services provided by just about any web framework, and we're going to learn to create web servers, a lot of different web servers, with Express.js. We're going to understand and use routing and understand what we mean by that in the context of a web framework. And in particular, we'll be doing that with Express.js. We're going to learn how to get information from HTTP requests and how to send the HTTP responses and customize them the way we want to. We're going to also learn how to enhance and extend Express.js functionality with middleware. So what is the minimal features that you'd get from a web server? Okay. So, or a web framework. Things that you really want to be able to do is be able to map basically the URL and the HTTP method, the request that comes in, to some type of action, okay? And that's usually turned into a function call, okay? This process of mapping URL and method to a function call is sometimes called routing, okay? This would be application layer routing, not to be confused with IP Internet Protocol layer routing of packets, okay? So this is an application layer type of thing. What else would they do? They would process request messages prior to giving that information to the action above, the method, the function call, okay? To do things, I don't know, as simple as sometimes pulling out the path portion of the URL or the query part and turning it into a nice object for use and things like that. Okay, those are common things that even minimalistic web frameworks will do for you. They'll also help you create and augment HTTP response messages, okay, under the control of the action and such like that, okay? So remember all those headers and things like that? They're going to help take care of a lot of the default headers that we need or that should be specified that so we don't have to. Okay, we can always add more. Now, in more advanced web servers, and advanced meaning more fully featured, sometimes included with the web server is a database connectivity technique. Okay, sometimes it's known as object relational mapping. Okay, this was more or is typical in larger, well-established or more classical web frameworks. Okay, that would be a big part of what they do is have this object relational mapping stuff. Okay, not needed in all cases though. Okay, other things would be like content administration, it's administration user interface, stuff to help with deployment, outline generators for the site to get you started, REST API generator, all sorts of things. However, with these full-featured frameworks, there are many things included in the box, not all of which you may need. Okay, some may be designed with a particular architecture. That means like software architecture, application architecture model in mind. Okay, you have to see if this is going to be a good fit for your problem. Okay, they can have big learning curves and footprints. If they're for what you want to do, that's great. If not, then what we're going to be doing, looking at a minimalistic framework. Okay, so examples of full-featured, feature-rich frameworks are like Python's Django and JavaScript Sails. Note that Sails thing is built on Express.js, which we're going to be using. So Express.js gets used underneath other large JavaScript frameworks. Okay, so micro frameworks, that's what we're going to do. Basic processing only in the box. However, they're extended via plugins or middleware. We've seen some of these concepts kind of creep up before in the course. Okay, so we'll extend it as we need, okay? Generally, these frameworks have a much smaller learning curve, given that you understand the basics of HTTP and URLs, okay? They're closer to the underlying application protocol, okay? So you kind of need to understand HTTP requests and responses, which we've done, okay? And if you understand that, it's more natural to understand what's happening with these micro frameworks, okay? Because they make it easier, okay? What they do is make it much easier than going and somehow using directly Node or some other, or Pythons or whatever languages direct HTTP features, okay? We don't want to get that low level. Examples. Classic example, very popular Python's Flask framework. And what we're going to be using here is Express.js, okay, which is an extremely popular JavaScript Node.js framework, okay. Why? Once again, smaller learning curve that reinforces what we're learning about HTTP, URLs, etc. It's extremely popular, okay. 10 million downloads a week. Well, that's not quite accurate. Okay, this week that I'm recording this, it's 14 million downloads so far this week. Okay, so it's popular. It's well tested from a bug and security point of view. It's easy to start with. However, it can scale to large sites. Okay, Node.js deployments are supported by many types of hosting services. Heroku, Google App Engine, AWS, Microsoft Azure, and such like that. We learned earlier that Node has a very good model for dealing with asynchronous operations, so it doesn't block. Okay, and so Node, with Express on top of it, can provide a very nice web framework, okay, for services. Okay, so the only thing, if you go and look at some of these hosting services, such as Heroku, Google App Engine, etc., you'll find that they are built to really scale up these Node.js type apps. Okay, they make it easy to spin up a lot of versions in parallel, so your site can scale up and handle lots and lots of users. Okay, so the only problem with that is those deployments can just be a little bit more complicated. Okay, so in this class we're going to be going with a little simpler deployment. So let's get down into Express.js. Okay, first of all, there is a archive of Express examples available. Okay, which includes everything you'll be seeing in here and a bit more. Documentation from the Express website itself. Okay, good place to go. Okay, they got their own documentation and they build on the stuff from Node.js. So at times you will go back directly to Node.js's documentation as if you need more information. Okay, so what exactly is it? It's a minimal and flexible Node.js web application framework that provides a robust set of features for web and mobile applications. That's the marketing blend. Okay, how do we install it? Installation is simple with npm. Okay, npm install express -- save. Okay, the simplest example we can run, so is shown here. Let's look at it in code. Here it is. I just happen to call it test here. Okay, but we see we're doing an import of Express. We're calling Express to create the app. We've got this function hello, okay, that we define that like takes res, whatever that is. We have an app, which is based on the Express thing, .get, something in some kind of string here, hello, and then an app listen blah. I wonder what all this does. Let's try it. Always good to run these things. So let's go node test.js, okay, or whatever you choose to call this file. Now it's just spat out saying example app listening on port 3000. What does that mean? Well, when we tell it, so let's go through these lines of code now. App listen 3000. So it gives a hint when I did my console log. I said listening on port 3000. We're going to listen to this on port 3000. Now I didn't give any other addresses and stuff in here. So my guess is that this is going to be running on localhost because I didn't specify anything else. And now let's put in the port number 3000. Oh, look at that. Hello website development. Okay, let's make it a little bigger, easier to see. There's the debug tools, and there's the, okay. Now, I didn't tell it to deliver a whole web page. All I did was deliver some text, okay? That simple. Send, okay? That simple, okay? But let's take a little look in here. Go to our network panel. Let's reload. And we see here that our browser made a GET response to localhost port 3000, okay? The response that came back, connection, blah, 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 blah. And look, down here we see a little response here that is telling us the server is Express. Okay. So something's working. So let's go through this now. Okay, so we ran our example. We visited the site. Hopefully you got the text. We did. Okay, so localhost. What is localhost? Localhost is the de facto standard name used to refer to one of your computer's local loopback addresses. What's that thing? It is usually set to 127.0.0.1 in your host file buried somewhere on your operating system. Turns out you actually have a whole range of loopback addresses. Okay, so why do they call them loopback addresses? These are local to your computer only. Other computers, even on your local network, cannot talk to your computer over this address. This is only for your computer to talk to itself, which is really convenient for testing servers. Okay, you don't have to put them out there, expose them to even your local network. It's only visible from your local computer. Okay, so localhost is the de facto standard name for usually 127.0.0.1. Okay, however, there's more that you can use. Sometimes your computer may have some security things that you may have to enable to let you use more of these addresses. Okay, but other than that, these are available for you to use. Okay, so first of all, localhost came up. That was our default. Okay, now can we listen on other ports and addresses? Ooh, I hope so. Let's see if we can. Let's go see if I got an example all ready to go. Let's see, hello to. Let's hello to. So now, okay, I've got the host information. I'm going to use a different one of those addresses. Going to use a different port. Okay. Now let's see if we can also have both servers running. Okay. So I'm currently running one of my servers, that test.js server. Okay, the simple one that we saw on the slides. Now let's see if we can know. I'm going to use another command line. Okay, and I'm going to go node hello to JS. It says it's listening on this other place. Let's see if we can get to it. Is this one still running? Yeah. Okay. So let's 127.0.0. What did I say? 2 dot, I forgot the numbers, 2.5555. Hello class, this is from this. This is from hello to JS application. Okay, so this is, Professor, what kind of name is that for a domain? Instead of domain names, we can just use IP addresses. Okay, so that's just the domain. That's just the IP address and the port number. Okay, so I've got 2 servers at this time running on my machine. Okay, I can have as many as I like. Okay, these are lightweight servers. Okay, and we're able to run more. Okay, so this is what we're saying here. Computers can have more than one IP address. So this listen command here that we run, okay, you can tell it the port you want it to use rather than the default of port 80 for HTTP. Okay, tell it the port we want to use. We can also tell it the IP address. Okay. This other thing here is just a callback that allows us to spit out some information, okay, when it starts listening. Okay, let's see what other things. So we did this, we made hands-on copies of multiple servers. Okay, you'll see hello 3 and stuff like that. We can change the messages, have them listen on different port host combinations. We did that. Start each in its own command window. Okay, you can run multiple servers. Okay, so line by line, what's happening? Okay, var equals express. We're importing express. App equals express call, function call. This is creating the express app. Okay, what's happening here? Okay, this, so app.get, what's this doing? This is registering a callback function on the root path, the slash root path of the website, of our website. Okay, the callback function here takes 2 parameters, rec, res. What do you think those are? Rec stands for request. Res stands for response. Okay, so the framework, okay, hands our function these 2 variables. If we need to get stuff out of the request, we'll get it from this rec parameter. And res is the response that we'll use to do all sorts of things to shape the response, but finally to send a response of one form or another. Okay. Down here, okay, we specified the port, specifies the host address. Okay, this is what do we have to do? We have to let all the way down through the operating system know that we want to listen on a particular TCP port, on a particular interface, an IP address, for requests to come in. Okay, because if we don't do that, there's no way to allow other computers, other processes running on our computer to receive, to send, and for us to receive the request messages, HTTP messages. So this is something you see all the time when you set up what are known as sockets or whatever. But basically this starts us listening on the port and on the IP address for HTTP requests to our server. Okay. Can we get a little bit more complicated? Yeah. Okay. And what do I mean by that? This is almost trivially extra complicated. Here I'm going to send a more complicated string, right? It's starting to look a little bit more like a web page. Okay. The other thing is, this is just JavaScript. This is Node JavaScript, right? I can define all sorts of variables I want in it. Okay, so let's go take a look directly at the code, count. So if I want extra variables to remember stuff, to keep track of things, store stuff. Okay, in this case, I can just make them up. Okay, I'm allowed to do that. It's just JavaScript here. So I'm going to create this variable to hang around. Okay, every time I get a request, okay, and by that means every time I get a HTTP request of the type get, of method get, to this root path, I'm going to increment the count. Okay, and I'm going to send back the information about how many times this has been visited. Okay, so let's run this guy. See this happen. Okay, hello 2. We'll turn off hello 2, and we'll go node hello count. Okay, you may be wondering why I always print out something like this. Listening on IP address and the port, it's when you run a lot of little servers, you can get yourself nice and confused about what server is running where. So I always, at the command line, have it print out just as for helpful purposes. Okay. Now let's take a look at this more complicated server. First of all, let's look at the network. Okay. Ooh, it incremented when we hit it again. Let's do it again. Oh, it keeps incrementing. So that variable is definitely working. Okay. So we're keeping some state information for our server in this variable. Okay. What happens if I come to this thing from a different browser? Let's open up a Chrome window. Let's visit 127.0.0.2:5555. 5 times? This guy said 4 times. Why didn't this update? Oh, that's right. It's a request response protocol. This guy, I have to, oh, he says 6. Oh, this is the total count. Now, what will happen if I do something like shut down my server, restart my server? Okay, this guy's been visited 6 times. Now it says just 1 time. This guy over here says 5 times. Which one's right? Well, at the time we made this call, that server had been up and running. Okay, and so it had been 5 times, but obviously if we hit it again, oh, because we restarted the server, so that variable got reset. Okay, so variables are great with the server. They keep things in memory, but if the server goes down, that information is lost. Okay, so that you'll see this a lot when we do server work. Some stuff we'll keep in memory. Other stuff we'll make sure we put into a database or put on the disk some way, okay, to make it persist. Okay, but nifty. Okay, so just because we're working in a web framework here doesn't mean all the stuff of our JavaScript that we've been doing doesn't apply. Everything we've been doing with JavaScript applies. We can bring in all sorts of variables and extra information here. Okay, so just remember that. Okay, so simple example. Okay, so what are some of our key concepts? Okay, routes. Express maps an HTTP method like get, post, put, delete, and a request URL path, like we saw, slash, to a function to handle the client request. Okay, so that's the first thing it does. This routing thing, it turns the URL method stuff into a function call if there's one listening there. And another thing it does is going to give us request and response objects. Okay, we abbreviate them rec and res. Okay, but those are the request and response HTTP objects. Okay, cleaned up a little bit to make our life easy. Third thing we're going to bring in is middleware that we write or somebody else writes to help us do things. okay? Particularly modifying request and response objects and things like that, okay? Now let's get into this routing thing a little bit more. There's a couple good references here, okay? But what we're talking about is how an application responds to client requests to a particular endpoint, which is a URI, URL, or path, and HTTP request, and so on, okay? Very easy with request. Okay, we have our app, and then we have a bunch of methods, okay? The method is the HTTP request method in lowercase, like get, put, post, okay? The path part is the path part of our URL, right? So that's after the domain name, okay? So we've got, what's the part of our URL? We've got the protocol, like HTTPS, / the domain name, blah, 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 .com. Then we have slash in the path, okay? That path part, okay, everything up to a query string or a fragment is the path part, okay? So we have that thing, okay? We have the method we'll put here, the path part we'll put here, and then we define our callback to do something with it, okay? Okay. So let's look at an example. Okay, this is called simple route. Okay, simple route. What we have here, one server, 1, 2, 3 different paths. 3 different paths in the server. Let's fire this up and see if it works. Okay, control that. I'll close the other one just in case it's running on the same port so we don't get a confusion. Oh, this guy's on a whole different port anyhow. Okay, so we're going to go node simple root.js. Okay, and we see we should have a slash path, a CS351 path, and a win path. Okay, let's see what happens. And what was the thing again? It was like 555, but the IP address was, okay. So here we're on the slash path. Okay, let's just put the slash in. Doesn't change, it takes it away here. Now let's put in slash CS351. Ooh, that says web development. Okay, we get a different function call gets executed. Okay, CS351, this function call, okay, what do I mean by function? This function. It's defined right implicit. It's anonymously defined right in here. That one got called. We saw, when we had nothing there, or just the slash, we saw this function got called. Okay, so this is application layer routing. Let's try going to wind. Another path. Sorry, Dr. B, no wind today. Very sad. Can't go windsurfing. Okay, now, so that means our same server can do a lot of different things for us. Okay, it can handle a lot of different requests. Great. Okay, we don't need 4 different servers to handle each different request. Okay, so we can bundle all sorts of functionality in our servers. Okay, now, people get pretty creative, and you may want to do pretty creative things with your route paths. Route paths can be strings, string patterns, or regular expressions. Different server frameworks may vary in the types of paths they support. What do you mean by that? We can have some simple matching paths. Look at this. Now we're going to do this match root.js. Here, it looks like one of those match star things like you use when you do stuff on Linux file systems, right? Okay, here we have win star, okay? And in both cases, they're going to specify stuff and print out stuff about what they heard. Okay, so let's try running this. Well, let's first verify that match root is here. match roots. Okay, so we got hello, we got blah, blah, blah. And this is going to be running there, so let's shut down this guy. Okay, and that was Control C to shut down. Node match root. Okay, so we're going to see this kind of behavior. Okay. Now, first of all, let's see if it just works. Okay. Second, let's try putting in a path that doesn't exist. This doesn't exist. Cannot get. There is no handler for this, so by default, it comes back 404. Okay. Now let's see if we've got a wind path. Wind. Wind. Now, what did we say? It's got a substitute thing in here, so anything after this should be okay. So I'm going to ask for the wind at Treasure Island on Tuesday. Sorry, Dr. B, no wind today on path. Oh, it's going to give me this whole rest of this path stuff so I can do something dynamically. Okay, I can take that information and go, say, do a forecast for the wind for Treasure Island on Tuesday. Okay. What was the other one we could go to? Okay. And notice I could make that as much stuff after the star as possible. CS351. Okay. So I go to CS351 / homework 3 problem 5A. Oh, that's all fits within that star, fill it all in stuff. Okay. What am I going to do with all that stuff? It's up to me. Maybe I'm going to go have a thing where I serve up homework answers or something. Okay. Simple match. Okay. Can we get more complicated? Yeah, we can have parameters that they will fill in for us. Okay, what are these? These are parts of the URL, okay, part of the path that we can use to capture values. What do I mean by that? Let's take a look. Easier to see it. Here is, it looks like kind of what we were doing before, but now look at the syntax. This kind of syntax will vary by your web framework, okay? In this case, I'm going to be able to go do a get. Okay, so I'm going to respond to gets. This thing that goes :site, okay, that's going to be what we call in a route parameter. If I go and ask rec params site, okay, this word and this word match up, I'll get whatever was put in there. Okay, so now I'm going to make a bad tide forecast here. I'm going to grab whatever site my user asks for, okay, whether I know anything about it or not, and I'm going to make a prediction of the forecast for what the tide will be at that site, okay, whether there's water there or not, okay. This is just to illustrate, okay, the fact that we can get this parameter fed to us nicely from, this is a typical type of things that a web server framework will do for you. Okay, so this is parameter route. Okay, and you can get fairly complicated. We're just going to illustrate this one with the tide side. Where am I running this? Okay, so I'm going to run this, shut down my previous server. And go node parameter route. And let's go to, watch this run. Tide at Fremont. The tide at Fremont will be 2.4 feet. Let's go Hayward. The tide at Hayward will be. Okay, so this is an example of a route parameter. Okay. Now, if I go Hayward slash CSU, I don't know if this will work. Okay. It doesn't correspond to a pattern that matches something. So I get a cannot get. Okay. However, I can have more parameters in here. Let's quickly look at the example. Wind site. Okay, look at this pattern here. Wind, then the site, slash date time, slash date time. Seems like I can ask for them of the wind at a particular site and a daytime using a particular pattern. Okay, so let's try this. Wind at Berkeley, time 11 p.m. Oh, no, I'm supposed to go date time 1 p.m. Oh, look at that. Okay, the wind at Berkeley. So it pulled out the Berkeley part here. Then I have my pattern date time. Okay, that was just part of a fixed thing. Then I gave it the time. Okay, whatever that was, and it pulled it out. Okay, so this is route parameters pattern matching. Okay, we can do these kind of things. Okay, the servers are set up to help with these kind of things, typical things. Okay. How do you know how you want your URLs to look? Depends on what your site is doing. Okay. Depends what your site is doing. Okay. We looked at the multiple parameter example. All right. Now, what if we need more information? What kind of information can we get from the request? Okay. Here's documentation on the request object. It's built on, it extends, adds information to Node.js's incoming message object. You can see the documentation there. But it's pretty much what you might expect from HTTP request message, except some things are broken out nicely. All right. It'll pull out the path in the query string and stuff like that. Okay, if there's need for that. Okay, other things, the body. Body's a bit more complicated because the body generally can contain lots of different things, so we'll generally have to know or expect something, and we'll use some middleware to help us process it. Okay. Similarly for cookies, okay, these are the kind of properties we can get. Okay. So let's take a look at a request in detail. Okay, so here is a case where I have a very simple, I'm going to get this, I'm going to listen for somebody calling it wind. Okay, then I'm going to send back all sorts of information. And I'm going to, this is really not recommended. We've got other ways of doing this. We don't stick lots of HTML text in the middle of our stuff like this, but this was just a single file example. Okay, if we had a lot of HTML that we were going to generate at the server, we'd most likely use a template engine, which is a different set of slides. Okay, now, but what's it going to do? Okay, it's going to send back information because it's going to pull out stuff from the request rec object. Okay, so our callback function here gets handed two parameters, the request parameter and the response parameter. Okay, it's going to send back, use the response parameter to send things back. It's going to pass the request parameter down to this little function. This function is going to do what with it? Oh, it's going to pull out the method. It's going to pull out the IP address. It's going to grab the original URL, the path, if there's a query string, etc., etc. It's going to do the full 9 yards, or as they say, or the 10 yards, or whatever that expression is. Okay, so let's see this thing run. So let's go to request info. Sure, it's here. Request info. Showing you the code. Okay, we've got these couple of different places, and where's this running? So I'll run it as usual. C node request info. Okay, let's go. Say win. Okay, look at all this information. Get HTTP version, client IP. Okay. Original URL /win, no query parameters, request headers. Look at this. User agent. It knows that I'm using the Mozilla browser, Firefox browser. Knows that I want HTML. Okay. All this information is available to us. We don't need to use it. Okay. How would I put in a query string? Oh yeah, that's something like that. Then we go name equals like Dr. B, and what do we do? Separate things. We go title equals prop, and we'll see what happens. Oh, look at that. The query string gets broken up into a nice JavaScript object for us. See that here? Okay. So I just put in a query string. Okay. People usually don't put in query strings by hand. Usually that gets put in there by the HTML forms and such like that if it's a get form. Okay. But we can see all that information is made available to us if we want to use it. Okay. We will definitely be using certain things. Okay. Other things the framework will take care of for us. Responses. Okay. Express creates a bunch of responses for us. Okay. Express creates a response object for us, then we can manipulate it using the response API. Okay. Responses objects are manipulated in middleware or our route handler function. You must send a response of some type from our route handler, right? By that, okay, we mean at some point we say res send or something like that. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. Okay, sending a response, now this is a little added thing, does not force a return from your route handler. Use a return statement for that. You didn't, Professor. No, I didn't. Why didn't I? Because there was no other statements. If I had a statement after this one, so here I am right here. If I had a statement after this one, it would get run. That's probably not what we intended. If we send, that usually means we're done. So we should do a return, okay? Or, in this case, there's nothing more. It's going to drop off the end, right? It's going to force a return itself, okay? If you ever see an error about trying to send a response twice, it's probably because you've got some complicated logic and you forgot a return statement, okay? Sending a response. Okay, you can send an HTTP response, like a string, any kind of object or whatever. Okay, like we've been just sending some text here, a string that gets interpreted as whatever, okay? One thing we're going to use a lot of is res.json, okay? We're going to send a JSON string, okay? So that's another one, okay? And that'll be converted to a JSON string with stringify. We don't have to do a stringify thing like we do when we're doing fetch in the browser. Okay. Other things we can do is if we're using a template engine, res.render. Express works nicely with template engines. Okay. There's some other things for sending files and for doing redirects. Okay. Read up on them as you need them. Okay. Other things you can do, you can manipulate, set, append, okay, headers, okay, response headers. You may need to do that for some reason, depending on what kind of work you're doing, okay. Other things you may do is specify cookies, okay. We haven't learned about cookies yet, so don't worry about it, We'll go back over that when we work with cookies. Now, middleware. This is a fancy name for extra processing. Okay, and Express has a nice simple model. Okay, it's an extensible framework. Okay, like applications or software systems that support plugins, Express is extended with middleware. Okay, Express middleware are just functions that receive and operate on the request and the response object. Okay, you can write your own or use many different external packages. Okay, examples. Use this stuff very generally for like website logging things. Okay, they've got an example of that. They have an example where they show you just how to do it, or there's full featured third-party packages to do logging. Body processing, we're going to be using that. Yes, it's a plugin, but it comes with Express, the basic version of Express. You don't have to bring in anything more. You need to know if you need to use it, though. Are you expecting JSON on a particular URL? If so, you're going to bring in this middleware. Are you expecting, say, a post-form processing? If so, you need to use this middleware to do that. Are you expecting cookies, working with sessions, etc.? Want to serve up static resources? Express static, that comes built in too. You have to determine whether you want to use these things, even if they are, quote, built in. That means the functionality is there if you want to use it. Okay? So example, okay? What if you have some static content, okay? A bunch of static files, okay, that you'd like to be served up. CSS files, images, blah, JavaScript, okay? That's what Express static middleware is for, okay? So how do we deal with this? Okay, remember app is the thing is our Express app that we've created, okay? Use tells it to use this piece of middleware, which is just a function, okay? They're going to create this function that's going to get called all the time because there's no constraints on it, okay? This is going to generate a function whose job will be, whenever a request comes in, it's going to look at the path. If that path matches the name of a file sitting in this directory, it'll return that instead of doing any more processing, okay? This is really good for like CSS files or JavaScript files that you want to return, okay? So we put this first, okay? So once again, we said that with each, we'll check the URL's path against the content of the directory name. Note, this dir name is not included in the paths to the static resources. Okay, this is kind of just where we're telling Express we're going to put them. Okay, you don't have to use this on the static resources in your web pages and such. Okay, so here's an example, static and roots. Okay, so let's go static and roots. Take a look. Here, notice right at the top, we're going Express, use static, okay, and down over here, we're going to start this up. Ooh, use a slightly different port number. So let's go and run it. Shut down that one. Node, Express, oops, sorry, static and roots. Roots. Okay, let's go take a visit. We're going to go to the wind root. Okay. Professor, yeah. Oh, that doesn't seem like it's doing anything with static. Oh, we forgot to read the, okay. I'm telling it to look in a place called, directory called public for static access, static assets. Okay, so let's go to, oh, we'll just look at it through our browser here. Okay, that's templates. Here's public. Oh, I've got a bunch of different things in here, like a simple form.html. Let's go look at that, right? Because let's see, can I just type simple form.html? Oh, ugly, but here's a simple form. Okay. What if I say simple form 2? Oh, it's not found. Why? Because there's no form sitting in my public directory. Okay, that's the simple form nicer. Ooh, look at that. A little bit better. We got some background and such like that. Okay, so that's a nice plugin. Okay, nice piece of handling. What else? What else? What else? Okay, when we use that use, okay, it's every request that comes in gets passed by this piece of middleware. Okay. All requests that correspond to a specific path, just a specific method and path. How do we do that? Okay, so here's a homemade middleware example. Okay, so here's my log middleware I create. What is it just? It's just a function. Takes the request, the response. Oh, and if I write my own, I have to take this thing next. This extra thing that I call, basically to tell them that I am done, but keep processing. Okay. So here I say app use log middleware. Okay. Now I say something const win middleware. Win middleware called on path. App use. Oh, look, here's a path. Okay. Then I say use win middleware on everything that's associated with this path. Okay. Whatever middleware. Add some useless information to the request object. Water, whatever middle. Okay. Oh, this thing's going to really? Yes, you can do this. I can add information to the request object so then it gets passed to, oh, look at this. Get water. I've got the whatever middleware followed by a function. Turns out you can have as many functions as you want. How do they work? Each one gets the request and response object. Okay. The middleware has to call next, so the next function that's in the list gets processed. Okay. That ends as soon as request send gets sent, or some kind of response gets sent. Okay. That's why all the middlewares just keep passing on to the next function. Okay. That's at least what they're implying there. Okay. So let's run this. Okay. Middleware example. Oops. Lots of examples so you can see how this works. Node, middleware, example. Okay. So let's see. First of all, let's go to just, yeah, we are running where? On 222. Port 222. 2222. You're at root path. The other paths are wind and water. Wasn't the log middleware supposed to do something? Oh, yeah, look at this. Middleware test. Log middleware called from original use URL, blah, blah, blah. Log middleware called for original oh, my browser tried to get the fave icon. Okay, but the fave icon wasn't available. Let's try the wind path. You are on the wind path. Okay, let's go take a look to see what the middleware said about the wind path. Log middleware called. Okay, log middleware called. Okay, I don't see anything. Oh, look. The wind path, blah, blah, blah. Wind path called. Okay. Okay, so we have different ways of listening to different pieces of stuff. One thing we're going to do with middleware is we're going to use it to check if certain users are allowed to make calls to certain parts of the web page or our web server. Okay, we're going to check authentication, or not authentic. We're going to check the roles and use access control via middleware. Okay, so just a sampling of the kind of things you can do with middleware. Finally, let's specialize just a little bit. Okay, one very popular thing to do, especially with small web servers like this, is to serve up data. Okay, many applications just need to send and receive data rather than HTML, CSS. JSON is one of the most, maybe the most widely used non-binary data exchange format. Okay, sending and receiving JSON with Express is really easy. Okay, so let's see how to send JSON to clients. Here, let's start our basic JSON server. So I'm going to close down and node basic JSON server. Okay, it's running back on 5555. Oh, well, I do have the raw data looks like this, but I have a plugin running in my browser that shows me JSON. Okay, I received raw JSON back. Okay, and we can see, let's go take a look at this response. Okay, response header saying the content type is application JSON with the char set UTF-8. Okay, so when we see the response, our browser even knows to show us nice JSON. Okay, so what did we have to do to return JSON? Okay, basic JSON server. Well, we had to have some data. Okay, so I had a thing called WinThings. Okay, it was an array that contained a bunch of objects, okay, with a name and an age for various pieces of windsurfing or kite surfing equipment. Okay, we did a get, and all we had to do to return JSON, okay, we didn't have to convert it and stringify it. We just ran res for the response, .json, and handed it the object or array. That easy. Okay, nice. Okay, what about receiving JSON? Well, if we're going to receive JSON, we've got to set up the process a little bit. So here is, we're going to use a post. Okay, so that means whoever's sending to us, making the request, has to use the post method. So I'm going to receive a post method at the path add thing. Now I need to use some middleware to process the body. Okay, so I'm going to call express.json. This is going to produce a function to handle the body. Okay, it does take some options if you like. Okay, so after it's done processing, okay, the request object, its body is going to be a nice object if everything went right, if it actually received JSON. Okay, so all I'm going to do is to that list of WinThings, okay, which was an array, I'm going to push another thing on. Okay, how am I going to test this? Okay, forget Testing JSON servers is easy. We just use our browser. Okay. For posts, we need a way to send stuff. Okay. And since we're going to need to be able to do that in an automated form for testing rather than just, there are some tools that allow you to do one at a time, like posts of data and stuff like that. However, for testing purposes, we've already started to learn how to use node fetch. Okay, so we're going to use that library here. We're going to go get this node fetch. I'm running on the server, so that's why you're seeing require. Okay, I'm not doing this in the browser. I create a simple little object thing, name 13-meter kite, age 2 years old, fetch. Oh, look at this. That whole thing, okay, add thing, method, I have to use post. Now this is the fetch API, not to be confused with the Express API. Body, I got to stringify the thing. We didn't have to do that on the server side, did we? Express handled that for us. We're going to stringify it. Then we have to even put in headers to say content type application JSON to let them know we're sending JSON. And then we're going to then it to get our response back. We're going to run res.json to turn the response back into JSON. Then we're going to look at it. Whew, lots of stuff going on there. Oh, wait. We need to, let's take a look at that to show you that there's actually a function there. I mean, there's a file there that we're going to use, post test JSON. So here's a little file. How do I run this? This is just a node program. So let's stop this server. Okay, and then I go over to the other server to make sure we are running the basic JSON server. So now, watch carefully these two windows. Don't take your eye off them. Node, post, test JSON. What we saw before here, we've got two items currently on the server. This 10-meter kite and the 7.7 meter sail. Now we're going to run our little test code. Our test code node test JSON post test. Going to try and put something to the server. Okay, add thing. Oh, look, we have a little bit of server debug messages. Path, add thing received, name, 13-meter kite, age 2. And the response back was to the whole list of stuff. Okay, now let's go take a peek at the server just using our get interface. Okay, I said we can go do a get just from the browser. Now we see we have 3 things on the server. So, pretty easy peasy, okay, with Express and these nice modern tools to send and receive JSON from a server. Okay, so yes, we're going to be throwing HTML around. We're going to be doing all sorts of things in different classes. Okay, JSON is easy, relatively easy thing to do. Okay, we got a lot more stuff to do to protect the servers and things like that, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of an overview of the power we're going to get and ease we can make all sorts of servers with Express.